My name's Linda Park. I'm 29, and until a year ago, I thought I understood what just friends meant. Turns out it's the softest lie two people can tell each other before something breaks. Peter and I met 3 years ago through mutual friends at a small rooftop party. I still remember how he made everyone laugh without trying. I was the quiet one then, the one who listened more than I spoke. Somehow he noticed that about me. That night he said, "You look like someone who finds comfort in silence." I didn't know whether to be flattered or terrified that he'd seen me so clearly so fast. We started hanging out at first in groups, then just us. Coffee after work turned into midnight walks, long messages about music, failed relationships, and childhood wounds we pretended not to still carry. He'd tease me for overthinking, and I'd tease him for pretending not to. Somewhere between all those jokes, something unspoken began to hum underneath every conversation. Late night calls that were supposed to end after one episode of whatever show we were watching stretched into dawn. He'd tell me about his dates, and I'd pretend not to care. I'd tell him about my ex, and he'd pretend to listen while scrolling his phone. Still, when he'd text you up at midnight, I always was. Always waiting for something that never quite arrived. The truth, I was falling in love with my best friend. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, quiet, like rain soaking into the ground, until one day you realize you're drowning in it. One Friday night, I stopped pretending. Peter had a rough week. His boss yelled at him, his ex had posted something smug on social media, and he came over to vent. We ordered takeout, watched some old movie neither of us really followed. Halfway through, he leaned his head on the couch and sighed. "You're the only person who doesn't make me feel like a failure." I laughed softly. "That's a low bar." He smiled, tired but sincere, and said, "Nah, you're just safe." Something about that word cracked me open and hollowed me out at the same time. Safe. Not special, not loved, just safe. We sat in silence. Then he turned eyes softer than I'd ever seen. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No music, no perfect timing. Just two people breathing the same air, both knowing the truth they'd been avoiding. I didn't overthink it for once. I leaned in slowly, hoping he'd meet me halfway. He didn't. He froze. Then that polite smile, the one people use when they're trying not to hurt you. "Linda," he whispered, "let's not ruin the friendship, okay?" For a second, everything went perfectly still. My pulse, the TV, even the air between us. Ruin. I wanted to laugh, to ask if months of emotional intimacy didn't already blur the lines. But all I managed was a nod. "Yeah, sure. You're right." I grabbed my jacket, forcing a smile that felt like glass breaking. "Good night, Peter." He looked almost disappointed that I didn't argue. "Hey, don't be weird about it. I'm not," I said quietly. "Just adjusting." That's the thing about quiet heartbreak, it doesn't explode. It just sinks into silence. I walked home through empty streets that smelled like rain, replaying every word. Let's not ruin the friendship. As if friendship hadn't already been ruined the moment one of us started pretending it was enough. My phone buzzed. A text from him. "Don't make this awkward. You know I care about you." I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I put it face down and whispered to myself, "I know you do, just not enough." That was the night I stopped being his emotional girlfriend and finally became exactly what he asked for, just a friend. He didn't know it yet, but that choice was going to cost him everything. For the first few days after that night, nothing felt different, except everything did. Peter still texted like usual. Memes, half-formed jokes, random, "You'd like this" links. I still replied, just shorter. Polite. Neutral. The kind of tone you use with coworkers, not the person who once knew the rhythm of your heartbeat. He didn't notice at first. That's the thing about people who take your warmth for granted, they only miss it when it's gone. The first weekend after the friendship talk, he called like nothing happened. "Coffee. My treat. I owe you for listening to my drama again," he said, laughing like old times. I hesitated, then said yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know if I could see him without falling apart. When I arrived, he was already there. Same cafe, same seat by the window. The same easy smile that used to make my stomach flutter. Only this time I didn't feel much of anything. "You're late," he teased. "I had errands," I replied. No apology, no explanation, just truth. He studied me for a second. "You seem different." "Maybe I am," I said. "Maybe I finally listened to you." He frowned slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled lightly. "You said we're better as friends, so I'm being one." He laughed a little awkwardly. "Don't be dramatic, Linda." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just consistent." After that day, I stopped being the first to text, stopped checking his stories, stopped waiting for his name to light up my screen. When he called late at night, I'd let it ring. I told myself it wasn't revenge, it was balance. And slowly it worked. I started sleeping better, eating better. The fog in my chest began to lift. I realized how much of myself I'd spent trying to keep our almost love alive. He noticed the shift eventually. One night he texted, "You okay? You've been distant lately." I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, "Yeah, just been busy. No emoji, no soft landing. Just the truth." He replied with a thumbs up, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty for not giving him more. Weeks passed. He tried to make small talk, sending old inside jokes, a selfie from the cafe where we used to hang out. "Miss our caffeine therapy sessions," he wrote. "Glad you're getting therapy," I replied. He didn't text back for 2 days. It should have hurt. It didn't, because the silence wasn't a punishment anymore, it was peace. Then came brunch. He suggested we catch up properly, so I agreed. We met at the same spot where he once told me I was safe. I arrived 15 minutes late. No reason, just choice. He looked surprised when I didn't hug him. "You're avoiding me," he said, half smiling. "I'm here, aren't I?" He chuckled, but his eyes were searching mine for something warmth, maybe. It wasn't there. We ordered, talked about work life, everything except what mattered. Then halfway through his omelet, he said, "You seem different lately, like colder." I took a sip of my coffee. "Maybe I finally realized what I was to you." He blinked. "My best friend." I smiled faintly. Exactly. When we stood up to leave, he hugged me longer than usual. I let him. My arms stayed still at my sides. He pulled back, frowning. "You're really not going to say anything?" "What's there to say, Peter?" I asked gently. "You wanted friendship. This is it." His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time since we met, he looked unsure, like he was standing at the edge of something he couldn't control. As I walked away, I felt something new. Not anger, not heartbreak, just clarity. That night, I deleted our old photos from my phone. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed proof that we were once close. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for someone who doesn't choose you is stop choosing them too. When I looked in the mirror before bed, I barely recognized myself. Not because I'd changed overnight, but because I'd finally stopped shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. And somewhere in the distance, I knew the moment he realized I'd really let go, he'd start to chase. It began quietly, the kind of shift you only notice when the air between two people changes temperature. Peter, the man who once told me not to ruin the friendship, suddenly seemed intent on keeping it alive. He started sending more texts. "Hey, remember this place? You'd laugh at what my coworker said today. Can we talk, just catching up?" At first I thought it was guilt. Then I realized it was fear. The kind people feel when they sense you've finally stopped orbiting them. By the time spring rolled around, I'd rebuilt pieces of my life he'd quietly taken space in. I joined a book club, started running again, and most surprisingly began to enjoy my job. That's also when Troy came along. He was a new hire in marketing, confident but kind, the type who didn't need to fill every silence. We became friends quickly, the way you do when someone sees you as you are, not as who you used to be for someone else. Peter didn't take it well. The first time he saw me post a group photo, Troy standing beside me, smiling, he commented, "New circle, huh?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji. He sent another message, "You've changed." "Yeah," I typed back. "That's what time does." No emoji this time either. A week later, he coincidentally stopped by the cafe near my office, the one he'd never liked before. "Oh, wow, you work around here?" he asked, feigning surprise. "I've worked here for 2 years," I said flatly. He chuckled. "Guess I just forgot." That word "forgot" made something twist in me. Funny how people only forget what didn't serve them. We sat for a few minutes pretending it wasn't strange. He kept glancing at my phone when it buzzed. I didn't hide it. I wanted him to see Troy's name light up my screen. "New friend?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, he actually listens when I talk." His jaw tensed just slightly, enough for me to notice. Over the next few weeks, Peter's tone shifted from casual to needy. "You up, miss our late night talks? I just can't sleep lately. Everything feels off." At first, I ignored them. I wasn't being cruel. I was just done performing patience for someone who'd never earned it. Then came the calls. One night, 3 in a row. I finally answered, half out of concern, half out of exhaustion. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." "Then maybe you should try," I said softly. There was a pause, long trembling. You don't care anymore, do you? He whispered. I could have lied. I used to. But this time I said, not the way I used to. Silence again. Then he hung up. That was the first crack in his calm. After that, he started appearing in places I didn't expect: my gym, a bookstore he'd once mocked, even a mutual friend's birthday dinner he'd skipped last year. Every time he'd act surprised to see me. Every time I'd act like I believed him. But there was something raw in his eyes. The realization that I was slipping from the role he'd cast me in the dependable, waiting, ever-patient friend. One night I got a message that made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. You've been on my mind lately. I miss how things were. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. Because here's the truth. Once you stop chasing someone who feeds on your presence, they either lose interest or lose their balance. Peter wasn't ready to lose either. And the more I stood still, the more desperate he became. The next time he saw me, it was by accident, or maybe not. I was leaving the office with Troy, both of us laughing about something trivial. Peter was waiting by his car across the street. He didn't wave, just watched. That night I got another text. Who's Troy? I stared at the screen for a while, then replied, a friend, just asking. You two seem close. We are. That was it. No apology, no softness. And I think that's when it finally hit him I wasn't orbiting him anymore. He was the one standing still now, watching me move. It happened one Thursday night. The sky was bruised with storm clouds, and I was halfway through making dinner when my phone buzzed again and again. Peter. 11 missed calls, then a message. Please, can we talk just 5 minutes? I'm outside. For a second, I froze. The version of me from months ago would have dropped everything, but I wasn't her anymore. Still curiosity, or maybe closure, pulled me to the door. He was leaning against his car, rain dripping from his hair, the same sheepish smile he always used when he wanted forgiveness before even asking for it. Linda, he said softly. You weren't answering. I was busy, I replied. He shifted, looking at me like I was the one who'd changed languages on him. You're different lately. I've heard that before. We ended up talking in his car, windows fogged, wipers swiping away the tension that had built for months. He started slow, the way people do when they're rehearsing guilt. I know I hurt you, he said. I didn't mean to. I thought I needed space. I stayed quiet. He kept going. You were always the safe one. I guess I wanted excitement, something new. But it wasn't what I thought. Didn't go well, I asked quietly. He gave a short, bitter laugh. She wasn't you. Those words used to be my fantasy. Now they just sounded small. I looked at him and saw a man who only realized my worth when it stopped orbiting around him. Peter. I said carefully. You told me to be your friend. This is what friendship looks like. He flinched a little. You don't have to be so cold. I'm not cold, I said. I'm consistent. You just don't like what it feels like when it's not all about you anymore. He stared at me, eyes glassy. You always treated me like I mattered, he whispered. And you taught me what happens when someone doesn't, I replied. A car passed its headlights, slicing through the rain. For a second, his face looked younger, scared almost. Do you ever think we could go back? He asked. No, I said simply, because I finally moved forward. The silence that followed was heavy but clean. He exhaled, shaky, like he'd been holding his breath for months. You've changed, he said again, almost to himself. That's what healing looks like, I told him. He nodded, but his smile faltered. I miss how you used to look at me. I met his gaze. You can't miss something you threw away. He winced, not angry, just hurt in the way people are when truth lands too close. When I stepped out of the car, the rain had turned soft. He called after me. Linda? I turned. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. For everything. I nodded. I believe you. But that apology's for you, not for me. He blinked. What do you mean, you're saying sorry to feel lighter? I said. I already let it go. I watched realization flicker across his face, the shock of someone who expected to be forgiven and missed. But I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. That night I sat on my balcony, the city buzzing, below the storm, now just a drizzle. I thought about how love can decay so quietly it becomes memory before you even know it's dying. Peter thought regret was a key that could unlock what he'd closed. But regret only unlocks understanding, not second chances. I looked up at the clouds parting above the city and smiled. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not from him, but from needing to be chosen by him. It didn't take long for Peter's regret to shift into something else: performance. A week after that night, I started hearing from mutual friends. Hey, did you see Peter's post? I hadn't, but they showed me anyway. A black and white selfie. The caption read, "Some people change so much you wonder if they ever cared at all." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp. The same man who once called me safe was now painting himself as the broken-hearted victim. I didn't comment, didn't text, didn't feed it. Silence has a way of starving ego faster than anger ever could. Meanwhile, life started to feel quiet in the right ways. Mornings were lighter. The space in my head that used to be filled with what if finally felt clean. Troy and I began spending more time together, slow, easy, natural. He'd walk me to my car after work, never rushing, never filling silences with empty words. Once, when I told him I was trying to unlearn my habit of fixing people, he said, "Good. Let them fix themselves for once." It wasn't romantic then, but it was the kind of kindness that builds a foundation before the fire ever starts. Peter didn't vanish, though. He hovered, liking old posts, replying to my stories with vague comments like, "You look happy lately." At first, I ignored them. Then one day, curiosity won. I opened his profile. Inspirational quotes, gym selfies, one photo with a girl whose smile looked nervous. The caption, "New Beginnings." I didn't roll my eyes. I just closed the app. That's when I realized the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. A month later, he texted again. "Can we talk?" "I think I owe you an explanation." "You already gave it," I replied. "Not properly. I miss us. You miss control." I typed back, then deleted it. Instead, I left him on read. That night, he called. I didn't answer. He left a voice note, his voice low, trembling, just drunk enough to be honest. "I hate that you don't chase me anymore." The next morning, he followed it up with, "Ignore that. I was just emotional." I did. And then came the message that told me everything I needed to know. "You think you're better than me now, don't you?" I stared at it stunned, not because it was cruel, but because it was finally honest. For the first time, he'd said what his pride had been screaming all along. I typed back, "No, Peter. I just stopped letting you define my worth." He didn't reply. That night, I sat in my apartment lights, low laptop open, half working, but mostly thinking. Every story has a moment when the villain realizes they're not the main character anymore. That was his moment. I thought back to all the nights I'd begged the universe for closure and realized I'd already lived it. Closure isn't a conversation. It's the day you stop needing one. Weeks turned into months. My world kept expanding. Dinners with new friends, weekend road trips, spontaneous laughter that didn't feel borrowed from someone else's approval. Troy and I grew closer gently, the way two people do when neither of them is trying to prove anything. He asked me once, "Do you ever think about him?" "Not really," I said truthfully. "Sometimes I just remember who I was around him." He nodded. And I'm glad she's gone." But Peter wasn't ready to disappear from the story just yet. Because when someone used to being adored suddenly loses control of the narrative, they'll do anything to rewrite it. He started showing up at mutual events again. Dinners, birthdays, even a friend's engagement party. He'd linger too close, start conversations that sounded casual but felt loaded. At one of them, he said quietly, "You seem happy with him." I looked at him calm, steady. "I am." He smiled, but his eyes betrayed something darker envy dressed as nostalgia. Later that night, he texted again. "You've really changed." "That's what moving on looks like," I wrote back. "It hurts. Healing usually does." That was the last time I entertained his messages, because by then, I'd realized something powerful. The people who break you will often come back just to check if the damage still belongs to them, and the greatest revenge is when they find nothing left to hold on to. When Peter said once, "You used to love me," I smiled. "I did," I said softly. "But that version of me doesn't exist anymore." 6 months later, life had a rhythm again. Mornings began with quiet coffee and sunlight on the kitchen floor. My laughter wasn't something I had to rehearse anymore, it just existed. Troy and I had become something real. Not the kind of love that burns everything down, but the kind that builds something worth standing in. Steady, warm, honest. He never made me guess what I meant to him, and that alone felt like luxury. So when a mutual friend's wedding invitation came in the mail, the one I knew Peter would also attend, I didn't hesitate, because I wasn't afraid anymore. The ballroom was glowing that night. Chandeliers, laughter, soft music curling through the air. Troy's hand fit naturally in mine as we entered. And then I saw him, Peter. He was by the bar, drink in hand, hair shorter, smile tighter. When our eyes met, he froze, the brief flicker of someone realizing too late that time had actually moved without them. He walked over slowly. "Linda," he said, voice steady but thin. "Didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," I said, smiling politely, "but I'm glad I did." His eyes darted to Troy, who was talking to a friend nearby. "So, that's him." "Yeah," I said simply. "That's Troy." He nodded, swallowing hard. "He seems nice." "He is." There was silence, not awkward, just heavy, the kind filled with everything that would never need to be said again. "You look happy," Peter said finally. "I am. You really moved on, huh?" "Yes." He gave a shaky laugh, trying to sound casual. You seem different." "More peaceful," I offered. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that." I smiled faintly. Turns out peace looks a lot like letting go. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something more, to reach out to ask for another chance. But he didn't. Maybe he finally understood. Later in the evening, he found me again, this time alone near the buffet table. He hesitated, then said, "You know, I used to think you were too serious, too careful." I raised an eyebrow. "You told me that more than once." He smiled, eyes distant. "Guess I was wrong. You were just protecting your heart. I didn't get that back then. You weren't supposed to," I said quietly. "You weren't meant to keep it." He looked down, tracing the rim of his glass. "I thought I wanted passion, but maybe I just wanted attention." I tilted my head. "You always did. The problem was you didn't know the difference." He flinched, but nodded. "I hate how much that hurts." "It only hurts because you finally understand it's real," I said gently. When the music changed to something slow, Troy came over and reached for my hand. As he led me to the dance floor, Peter stepped back, giving a small, sad smile. "She's lucky, you know," he said quietly. I looked at him. "No," I said. "We're lucky. We both chose better." Then I walked away. As Troy's arm slid around my waist, I felt the world fade into the rhythm of the song. He whispered, "Was that weird for you?" "Not really," I said. "It was just a reminder of how far I've come." He smiled and kissed my forehead. "She didn't know what she lost, did she?" "She never did," I replied. Across the room, Peter stood alone at the edge of the dance floor. The same place where we used to laugh, the same place where I once mistook comfort for connection. Only now the music wasn't ours anymore. I rested my head on Troy's shoulder and closed my eyes. The girl who once waited for Peter's text was gone. The woman in her place didn't chase love anymore. She built it quietly and deliberately with someone who stayed. Because that's the real victory, not revenge, not regret, just peace. Peace doesn't need witnesses, it just needs you to stop explaining.